Namaste and welcome to this exciting episode of Sattology, debunking mythology. Sattology means science of truth, the study of truth. Opposite of that is mythology, which means science or study of fake, lie, or imagination. The scourge of isms have destroyed the native cultures. You all know nativism, animism, pantheism, monotheism, polytheism, and all these words are somehow attached to the native cultures all over the world. Shamanism, paganism. And the only thing which is out of these isms is iti, which is Christianity. Other than that, everything else is ism. But anyway, we call Christianity also as Christianism because it is also equally compliable to the general laws they have made. So we have a very special author today. He has launched a new book, the Rama of Acts. So we all know whom we are talking about. So let us welcome Ranjith Radhakrishnan. Welcome to the show.
Namaste. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. Jai Sri Ram.
So before we start off, so you put on a beard or everything. Was it a reason for the book promotion or is it your natural style?
No. I mean, there was a particular temple that I was going to visit. So I had stopped. I mean, there was this particular sadhana I was doing. So it grew the beard there and I just maintained it after that. Nothing to do with the book.
And also I like that you have put the tilak also, which is very good actually.
Yeah, I mean, it's just past 6, so.
Okay. When you were writing this book, because Parshuram's story is a very interesting story. And your book is about fiction and it's like a novel written for people. And yeah. Parshuram's story is Parshuram is respected. People pray to him. And his mother Renuka and his father Jamdagni are also extremely famous in Shastra. And yes. So how did you choose Parshuram's story? What was your personal motivation?
Yeah. So a little bit of background as how I started doing this. My first published work was a short story in an anthology called Unsung Valor. So we had to pick one character from the Mahabharata and talk about one day of his life during the 18 days of war. So I wrote on Shakuni and on the 11th day of the Kurukshetra war and what happened between him and Sahadeva. And that was my first published work. And once that came out and the reviews were good and feedback was good, this urge to write a story, a full-length novel. Your biggest drawback is your self-critic, who keeps asking you whether this is good enough, whether this is publish worthy. A lot of people have been telling me, please do write. I didn't take it seriously till this short story got published. And when I started to write the story, I actually did not ask myself, why did I choose to write on the 6th avatar of Mahavishnu? And why was I doing this till I was maybe 6, 7, 8 chapters into the story? Two things here. We have a lot of books being written about Sri Rama and Sri Krishna. We have the Harivamsha, we have the Ramayana. People come up with, their interpretation of it, but not much focus on the 6th avatar. So when I was reading up on him, I found a lot of stories, but not much literature. I think the most famous book on Bhagavan Parshuram is called Bhagavan Parshuram and it was written by K.M. Munshiji. I think this was in 1965. Now, he's a very great personality. I think he was Home Minister of Gujarat and one of the prime movers behind the reconstruction of the Somnath temple. We have had people write about Parshuramji in between, but I never found the whole story somewhere. So what happened was between 1999 to 2003, 1999 was when my father passed away and we had a lot of deaths in our family. And we have this small temple on the outskirts of Thiruvananthapuram, that is the capital of Kerala, where the deity is Parshuram, and that's where we go to do the last rites of the departed. And I had stayed in Trivandrum for a couple of years before that, and I've gone to all the major temples there. Anantapadmanabha Swami, Achugal, Sri Kanteshwaram. I've gone to all of them. Nobody even told me about this temple. So it's only when I was doing the last rites of my ancestors that I used to keep going back to this temple to either do the 13th day rite or a year after they have passed on. And that's when I realized that I don't know anything about this avatar. I just knew the basic story, that I knew that he was the son of a Saptarishi and there was this beheading of the mother. But why did he behead his mother? What happened to him after that? So I started to read about it. And when you have this impulse to write, there are some certain points in the story, certain critical points where, if you're just a casual reader, you read and say, no, this is unbelievable, this is too much, I can't believe this, and you move on. But those are the critical points that you have to pay attention to, because there is a meaning wrapped up somewhere there in the story, and you're supposed to, unwrap that with whatever intelligence or imagination Devi has bestowed on you. So that critical thing of him beheading his mother on the orders of his father was something that, that explanation did not sit right with me, and I had to find something. So I kept searching for something. And oddly enough, when we are in school, we are given a subject to write about, we are asked to think about it and then write. I think when it comes to creative writing, perhaps that's not the right way to go about doing it, because most of my answers came while I was writing. This was during the lockdown. My family was in Chennai when the lockdown was announced, so I was pretty much staying alone. There's nothing much to do. So I just cut off all the OTT and the TV and the channels and all this stuff, and I just sat down to write. And it's when I wrote that, probably what you can say, the answers started to come. And that's how the story took on the form that you're seeing now as the book. So I'm just happy that by Devi's blessings, I was able to, write Parshuramji's story. And perhaps you'll have to read and tell me if I've done justice to it or not. I leave it completely up to the reader.
So, like, the one general thing which comes in with Parshuram is a very famous story where Parshuram meets Sri Rama, and it's mentioned by Valmiki Ramayana.
Yeah.
And it's a very interesting story where from Ayodhya, they're after the Sita Vivaha and Ram Vivaha, they're coming back. And to Ayodhya, the entire Dashrath Maharaj's army. And then they see a very beautiful scene described by Valmiki, is that the dust starts flowing, and he gets an information that is Parshuram coming, and Dashrath Maharaj becomes very anxious now, because my son is a Kshatriya. Now what is going to happen? Because he's already finished. And he almost begins to plead to Parshuramji. Parshuram is also Vishnu, but pleads to him that please spare my son. Please let him go. He's a young boy, 16, not even 16. He's just turned 16.
Yes.
And then Bhagavan Ram is not taking it lightly. He's very quietly watching the whole incident. But then he said it is difficult for him to tolerate the insult to his father. And then that scene of taking the bow from his left hand, Bhagavan Ram's left hand, which bow cannot be lifted other than Parshuram, Shiva, and Vishnu. Only three people can lift that bow. He almost, but the way Valmiki mentions is that he picks up the bow and literally flies into his hand. And immediately he puts a pratencha on it, like the arm set with a bow, arrow. So, did you cover this incident in your book?
Okay, that is part 2, which is to be published next year. So part 1, I stopped with the climactic battle with Kartavir Arjuna. I don't think too many people know about him too. He's one great Samrat of India who unfortunately went the wrong way. which is why we needed an avatar at that time. So I stopped with that battle. Part 2, when it comes out, I cover Parshuramji's meeting with Sri Rama and Sri Krishna.
Yeah, he's the same Arjuna, which Karthavir Arjuna, who put Ravan in his armpit.
Yes, yes,
Eh? It's
yes.
like it's like playing with him, Ravan,
Yeah.
and Ravan was not the almighty person during that time. So in this incident, like in your part 1 of the book which you have written, because I think after the Bhagavan Ram picks up the bow, and that's the end of Parshuram Leela, pretty much.
Yeah, you find a mention of him in the Mahabharata. He comes on the peace mission
Peace
with
mission.
Sri Krishna.
But yeah,
Yeah,
but he just goes to Tapasya on
yes,
Mahindra.
yeah.
Okay.
And he's supposed to be the teacher of the coming avatar, the 10th.
Yes.
Strangely enough, or interestingly enough, we don't have a mention of him meeting the 9th avatar. You have him meeting the 7th and the 8th, and then he's going to the 10th. So what happened to the 9th is a big question mark there. So I stuck with the story that maybe a lot of people know, which is his battle with Karthavir Arjuna. Everything that happens after that is in part 2. I guess it will be out by March next year.
So nowadays, lot of like the leftist communism influence and Christianism influence people are there who say so much violence with the Hindu gods. So how do you justify that accusation through your book?
I think that's a fantastic question, because somehow we have been given this impression that Himsa and Ahimsa are two polar opposites, and we must always stick to the Ahimsa side of it. I don't agree with that. I think Himsa and Ahimsa are complementary and both are required. And when you talk about our avatars, they have always resorted to Himsa to uphold Dharma, which is a very important distinction. Even their antagonists, Karthavir Arjuna, Ravana, are people who have got enormous blessings from the gods themselves, but have taken to adharma. You are not going to confront these people, overcome them, establish dharma by Himsa alone. I think probably after the Bhakti movement started in India, where your personal devotion to your Ishtadeva was important, your personal connect with them was important. And then we had Vedanta, which was talking about the Parabrahman and the Nirguna Deva. I think somewhere we have lost the Himsa part of it, and we are not able to justify it properly. While our avatars have always shown us that it requires karma to do it. And we forget that the Bhagavad Gita itself was narrated to Arjuna by Sri Krishna on a battlefield. And he was telling him to go forth and fight. When you're faced today with a civilizational war, I don't think preaching ahimsa is going to help you, succeed in that war. You do need ahimsa to maintain a civilization, but to save it, you need to be able to say, thus far, no further. And one of the things I really admire about the 6th avatar of Mahavishnu is that he's not only going to tell you, thus far, no further, he's going to tell you, take 10 steps back. Breach my rules, he's going to set up red flags, boundaries, and he's going to tell you, breach that, and you're going to pay for it. There is this popular saying in India, Shant hai to Sri Ram, Shant nahi hai to Parshuram. So, though he's known as an angry avatar, I don't think that's all there is to him. He teaches us valuable lessons as to when we should, make a stand, use Himsa to further our dharma and our civilizational interest. And you're not going to do that. Like there's this very famous Buddhist saying that says meditation is very good, but you're not going to be able to meditate next to a mad dog. If meditation is ahimsa, you need to chase that bad dog away or put an end to it. So you need the himsa there before you can, spread the ahimsa and, inculcate it, bring in civilizational values. They exist together. They are not polar opposites. And I think every avatar teaches us this. It's not just Parshuram. I think Sri Rama and Sri Krishna also do it. When he goes on a peace mission, before he tells you that I'm going to unleash Himsa on all of you all now, with Arjuna as his disciple. So it works together. Every civilization needs to have both. Relying on ahimsa alone, you're just asking people to trample all over you. I think this has to, I've tried to convey this in my book. I think that's a lesson we can all learn from, especially as Hindus. This is something we can learn from in the present day, when we are not only ideologically, but also in our physical day-to-day lives beset with so much transgression of our rights today.
You mentioned the term civilizational war. The civilization is only one in the world, that is Sanatan Dharma, which teaches morality, compassion, truthfulness, non-violence, and violence also, because Dharma is neither violent nor non-violent. We use it, it's like a more commonsensical righteousness principle. If somebody attacks you, you have to defend it. But so civilization is only one. So then who is fighting against civilization then? If civilization is only one, if you look at the common definition of civilization, means that morality, compassion, truthfulness, kindliness, these are the symbols of compassion. Dharma ke char pair, you have seen that, the four legs of Dharma. And that's civilization. Now, if you look at Christianism, Judaism, Islamism, or any of these isms, in none of them civilization aspect is there. Someone or the other is getting hurt all the time.
Yeah.
Like we have known all the story that in Christianism, women had no rights, were not considered humans also.
True.
Animals today are slaughtered like anything in USA. It's almost, they consume 350,000 animals a day. And that is, I'm only counting the cows.
Okay.
And India is the largest beef exporter today, one of the largest, top three.
Yes.
So the point is that, so civilization is only one, then who is fighting against the civilization? According to what you see from your book's perspective.
Yeah. See, I think when I was writing Kartavir Arjuna also, though he has been proclaimed adharmic by the Saptarishis, by his own guru, that is Guru Dattatreya, he himself is convinced that he's right, to the extent that he thinks that his guru, who gave him the blessings, who led him on a spiritual path, who was the enabler of such tremendous power that he has, is the one who's wrong, and he's the one who's right. I think everybody has this internal voice that tells them that what you're doing is right. This is the way forward. Power goes into the head, especially when you have a lot of power and your opponent is still recovering from wounds that are, have been inflicted on him through periods of history. So there is a little bit of arrogance and an ego that comes in. And there is this mind that convinces you that what you are doing is for the greater good, is actually dharma, when you've convinced yourself that it's dharma, when what you're doing is obviously adharma to the others. Now, when you have theologies and ideologies which preach supremacy over others, which are, to put it plainly, which is there in scripture itself, it becomes difficult to argue with them on a theological basis and tell them, no, this is where you're wrong, because that is not going to work. I don't know if I remember correctly, whether it was Winston Churchill who said this line, that when a particular community sharpens its swords, the Hindu is busy sharpening his argument. Now, sharp arguments are not going to stop sharp swords. Once they're swung at you, you need a shield or another sword to stop it. But where does that swung sword come from? It comes from a teaching, it comes from a belief where my path is right and everything else is wrong. When you otherize somebody, when there is an other, if you look at certain theologies, there is always an other that is being created along with the belief in your own theology, which is missing in Hinduism, which is our great strength. But now we got to understand that, these are divisive theologies at play, and you need to counter this. So this is my message to Hindus, especially who say that all paths lead to God. When they use the Bhagavad Gita to justify this and say Krishna said all paths lead to me, paths that deny Sri Krishna or his divinity do not lead to him. So when you say this, please use viveka, discrimination, to see what is that path actually saying. Don't say this to virtue signal and to show yourself as very secular or something of the sort. Please spend some time studying what the theology says, and then decide whether this actually leads to Sri Krishna or not. Would Sri Krishna approve of a path like this?
You
A little
mentioned,
bit. I mean, this doesn't need deep philosophical thought or anything of a sort. Just a plain reading will tell you that this is completely opposite to what Sri Krishna taught you.
Winston Churchill has been over glorified in the British history.
Yeah.
And Winston Churchill's words are as myth as Greek history. So, so Winston Churchill, you can call him one notch lower than even Lalu Prasad Yadav. He had no idea about history because in his own World War II, it was Indian soldiers who fought for the
Yeah.
British Empire, and it was because of them they were victorious. And
True.
and the argument is always in a civil society. That's why I said the only civilization is Sanatan Dharma civilization. That's why I said it, because the arguments and verbal and more civilized way of communication is present only in Sanatan Dharma. So in all other spheres, if you look at the Europe's history, and you will see the bloodshed by the churchism, and Winston Churchill himself is accused of killing 30 million Hindus in Bengal famine. We all know
Yes.
that. And so he's being glorified only for the Western audience, only for two countries, UK and USA. UK because they cannot leave him, USA because they were the colony of the Britain. So they got independence from Britain. And so only two people discuss him too much. I don't know why Indians glorify him too so much, despite him having such a bad record. Now coming to this book, actually, Rama of the Axe. So when you're writing this novel, what were your realizations? Like, were you in awe of Parshuram? What happened to you?
Yeah, I was already fascinated with him because Parashurama temples are so rare in India. And I come from Kerala. And the story is the whole Konkan coast, that is from Kanyakumari to Goa, was raised out of the sea by this avatar. And as I kept reading about him, my fascination only grew because not only is an avatar, he's met two subsequent avatars that come after him. He's got a Vedic hymn that's been attributed to him. This is a Mahavishnu avatar who is probably one of the biggest devotees of Mahadeva. There is a lot of myth-making, modern myth-making that's happening with, proclaiming Ravana as the greatest devotee of Mahadev. I do not agree with that. Parashurama is any day a greater devotee of Mahadeva than Ravana. And also, if you find a tantric text that's been attributed to Parashurama, the Parashurama Kalpa Sutra. Further on, he is a Saptarishi of a future Manvantara. He is a Chiranjeevi. He is also the creator of the world's oldest martial art, that is Kalaripayattu. There are two schools of Kalaripayattu. The northern one belongs to Parashurama and the southern to Agastya. Now, if you look at this particular avatar, he's almost everywhere. And he is a disciple of Guru Dattatreya, which now connects him to the Nath Sampradaya. Despite having so much attributed to him, temples are a little rare. We don't find much literature about him. We do not have a Parashuramayana or a Bhargava Charita or something of the sort. I don't know. We have 40 million manuscripts, I believe, in the National Manuscripts Mission, yet to be translated. Perhaps we will find his story there. Perhaps we will discover something which is the Parashurama Ramayana. So the more I read about him, more the fascination grew. And I thought that, my prayer was, Devi, give me the blessings to write properly about this avatar. And while I was writing, I was very particular that I do not lose the divinity of the avatar, nor the respect that should be, granted to an avatar. I didn't want to make him just human and, say that he was a great man and then later came to be considered God. I didn't want this to happen. The more I read about him, the more I thought that this is an avatar that deserves, more attention from our culture, our civilization. More people need to know about it. And I don't think I was doing justice by writing that he was a great man. He was just a mortal. So my book is about how he becomes an avatar. What is it? What was the spiritual journey? What was the dharma that he followed for him to be considered an avatar? And how did that amsha of Mahavishnu spark in him? So this book is not only about him overcoming his antagonist, it is also an internal journey about how a mortal becomes an avatar of Mahavishnu. I thought these stories could go in parallel and show you how they need to complement each other. There has to be yogic prowess within a person. Sri Krishna himself is called Yogeshwara. There has to be enormous spiritual power within a person to be able to do great things like this. I wanted to explore that aspect of the avatar. I wanted to show that, when we come to the sixth avatar, it is because of his doings that we probably did have, Sri Rama come up later, the Maryada Purushottam. The pool of Kshatriyas was so polluted by their own actions that it needed a little bit of cleansing before a Maryada Purushottam could emerge from it. And the avatar to do that was Bhagavan Parshuram.
So in the Bhagavad Puran, actually the avatar means one who descends on his own. Avatar doesn't mean that incarnation, or English is an incomplete language, but the English language has a lot of things which you can express properly.
Yeah.
In the if you look at the 16th in the Bhagavad Puran, it says, Avatare Shodashame Pashyan Brahmadroho Nipan Tri Saptakritva Prukupito Nichatra Karom Mahin. Tri Saptakrivata. So thrice Kritva means 21 times he destroyed the Kshatriya, all the Kshatriyas, right? 21 times. But it says Avatare Shodashame, the 16th avatar, according to Bhagavad Puran. So when so it's mentioned in Bhagavad Puran. So he is considered Vishnu avatar in any way. So the human aspect goes away. And if you look at Bhagavad Gita, which you said last time, in the chapter 9, 11th shloka, Bhagavad Gita, Krishna says that Manushim Tanumashra Param Bhavam. He says that the foolish people think of him as having assumed a human form, because they don't know that that he maintains the entire creation. So avatars are like that. Like for us, they may appear like human, but Bhagavad Gita makes it very clear that avajananti mama mudha. This is the word used. Manushim tanum ashritam means I have taken the manushim tanum means the body, ashrita, taken shelter of a human body. Param bhavam ajanantum mama bhuta maheshwaram. He says that. Chapter 9, 11 shloka, people can read it and reference it. So the point is, like, the whole concept of the Western concept. In Western concept, there is no God, because they are searching for God. So you have to believe in the existence of God. But Patanjali talks about experiencing Bhagavan through yoga. In a Kaivalya path, he comes to, after Samadhi path, after a different 4 paths are there. In the 4th part, he comes Kaivalya path, where he goes into much detail on how to experience after perfecting all other Samadhi, like Vibhuti path, Samadhi path, and Sadhana path, and then Kaivalya path. So then he comes to Kevalapad and he says, now you can experience because your mind intelligence is controlled and you know that you are an Atma. You're not the
Yes.
Buddhi, you're not the Man, you're not the Ahankar. Like Bhumi Raparno Vayu Khamano Buddhi Revacha. Ahankar iti me bhinna prakriti ashtada. Bhinna means you're separate from all of these.
Yes.
Yeah. So my question is that in this book, because you have written a fictional account in the form of a novel, I hope people make a movie on that. But I hope you have not done something like Manoj Muntashir.
No. No. Uh,
Just asking.
no. It's a good question, and I want to take it. Um, I wrote this book as a bhakta. Okay, I am a believer, and I'm sorry for using terminology that is, I'm speaking in English, so I'm trying to make it sound a little simple. Uh, so I did not write from a place where, like I mentioned before, where this was a great human being who just, you know, want people later on considered as an avatar. See, when as a reader, uh, once a book catches your interest and you're reading through it, especially when it comes to our Puranic stories um, and the characters who are mentioned there, I am prepared to jump through every hoop that the author lays out for me. Okay, maybe he's taken a little bit of creative freedom in, maybe changing the timeline. I'm okay with that. But when you come to the end of it and you tell me that this was a great man and then he was considered God, that is one hoop I can't jump to. I've never been able to do that, because the question that arises in my mind then is, uh, take a simple example. We have the story of how Bhagirath brought Ma Ganga down to earth. Now, everybody goes to Kashi or somewhere along the Ganga. We go to immerse the ashes of our beloved departed souls. We go to take a dip there. This is an enormous contribution to our civilization. This is something that no avatar has done. But you are not, nobody considers Bhagirath an avatar. We don't have a temple to him. So why is this great man not considered God? If you say that, others were great men, did great things, and then they were considered God, what is the differentiation there? So that this naturalistic, what they call it, naturalistic style of telling our stories of Purans, I think is doing a disservice to our stories. I didn't want to go down that path. I was sure that, even though if I write a book like this, the book category most probably would be fantasy or mythology or something like that. That's a book category. I wrote it as a believer. I think there are lessons that what you may perhaps in a very skeptical mind think is fantastical in our stories there has an explanation, has something there which, you need to unwrap and learn something from. For me, that was the beheading of his mother on the orders of his father. Why did he do that? The explanation that is, available easily is that he was so obedient of his father that he did it. Was that the only explanation there? Would a son behead his mother just because his father asked him to do it? Now you know that 4 brothers were offered the same thing and they refused to do it, and his father has executed them. So when you say something like this, then the reasoning that's given to you is that no, he wanted to save his life, which is why he went ahead and did this. You bring down the stature of the avatar immediately there. So there has to be something more to it. What is it? Why did he do that? What is the actual story behind it? Is the exploration in my book. And I have done this with the deepest respect to not just Parshuramji, but also to a Saptarishi, to Renuka Devi, and the gurus of Parshurama, who teach him the path along. So even though I say it's a fiction, why do I say it's a fiction? Because I based my research on the Brahmanda Purana. And I have a Malayalam copy at home. My uncle gave me a Malayalam copy. And I was happy that I read it in my mother tongue, because, sometimes like when writers once they finish a manuscript and they have to edit, what they do is, to change the background, they change the font, change the font size so that you're looking at something new. So your eyes catch something that you may have missed during the readings in the original format. So when this became a mother tongue that I'm reading it in, this is very heavily Sanskritized Malayalam that I'm reading in. I had to look up the meanings of words. This gave me, some kind of a different point of view to the story. And that's how I started off. So when I based it on the Brahmanda Purana, there were a lot of stories around Parashurama which are not there in the Purana. For example, Renuka Devi is a goddess in especially North Karnataka and South Maharashtra, Kul Devi to many, many people. There is a very famous temple there. There are also a lot of local folk tales about Parashurama. I don't know how many North Indians know that the Konkan coast has been raised by Parshurama and by throwing his axe into the sea. There are stories about him in Arunachal Pradesh. In Uttarakhand, there is a particular Ekadashi where Parshuramji comes to meet his mother. There is a temple, they carry him down on a palanquin. So this is a story that has encompassed the length and breadth of India, which you don't find in the Puran. So why did I take these stories? To me, it seemed to complete the picture of the avatar. We have this sort of view that what is there in the Puran is somehow superior to the folk tales. Not always. As long as it doesn't take away from the divinity and the stature of an avatar, I'm fine with reading that. It's only when you come and say that, somewhere there is some local story for which we do not know why it sprang up, which says that, there's somehow attribute something wrong, that where your mind tells you that, an avatar could not have done this. That's the only place where conflict comes. Otherwise, as long as it helps you complete the character of the person you're writing about, I'm all for it, which is the only reason I used fiction in this. There is no other reason why.
Most Sanatan Dharma followers, which are colloquially known as Hindus, but they follow Sanatan Dharma. Colloquially, they are known as Hindu, but they have been put the European mindset. In Europe, everything can be questioned because their civilization, according to them, started in 18th century. Before that, they were killing each other, colonizing people, killing each other, everybody. And 14th century, we all know the poverty of Europe. There is a Black Death. There is a book written, Black Death. People can read that book. Yesterday, I got a copy of that book, and in which it shows the pathetic condition of Europe and why European women were wearing hats, because people were actually passing, in the morning from the windows to the streets.
Yeah.
Okay, that's why they had a hole, not for the flower pots, but for something else.
Yeah.
So this is the condition of Europe. But when we think from the mindset of Europe, see, in Europe, everything can be questioned. But in the case of Sanatan Dharma, everything is written by very qualified people who have no interest in fiction. And generally, the most of the Puranic stories, you will find references all over the world. So, and Vedas are explained with the help of Purana.
Yeah.
Otherwise, people like you and me, we have no interest. Like, if I give you the book Vedanta Sutra, you will be like sitting on it for years. You will get bored after 15 shloka. So then you have to dovetail with the actual history, people who are practicing it, and then you start understanding everything else. Now, my last question in this series is like, so the Europeanism, or in Europe, there's a philosophy called skepticism. So people do not know the skepticism also has a guru. And many of the early Christianism followers are known as skeptics. So skepticism is actually invented, just like stoicism. Stoicism is also invented. So, we think that, we are just stoic. The stoicism was invented by stoic. So these every English word has a philosopher behind it.
Yes.
And these are all searching for God. Nobody has
Mm,
found it. Like even
mm,
today, the most Abrahamism followers, they want to prove the existence of God.
mm.
And if they cannot prove, then Stephen Hawking becomes their God. And so they become agnostic. But that's not
Okay.
the case with India, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
in India, we have a tradition. We have gurus, and they're almost like scientists and almost like philosophers, researchers. The home of philosophy is Sanatan Dharma. There is no other philosophy. Like Bhagavad Gita is enough for defeating all crazy arguments.
Yeah.
Now, the question is like, if does your book, uh, in the form which you've written in a, so people can read it easily, and just to add it, Samant Panchak in Kurukshetra is one of the most sacred places connected to Parshuram.
Yes.
And that's why
Absolutely.
and I'll, if I take Samant Panchak name, most of the Delhi people won't be able to tell you where is Samant Panchak. They
Okay.
won't be able to tell you. They're sitting in Delhi, but they won't know anything about nearby Delhi. Like somebody, when I was going to Hastinapur, they said, somebody asked me, does Hastinapur still exist?
Wow.
So this is, and I'm talking about educated people who asked me.
Okay. Hmm.
Then I had to make a video on the channel and I put it on so people can search Hastinapur and see where is
Huh.
Hastinapur. So my question is,
Yeah.
given so much Europeanism propaganda
Huh.
and in the educated English speaking crowd, so
Hmm.
many doubts have been put in
Hmm.
by the Europeans and all these mythology followers. The How does your book resolve that kind of doubt making or that kind of confusion in the minds of reader?
Great question to end this. Um, off late, I'll come to the book through this. A lot of young people whom I've been talking to have a great deal of interest and curiosity about this happening now, which did not exist when I was a young man, which was a couple of decades back. So the tide seems to be changing somewhere. Probably the writing of in English with of our Puranic stories suddenly became the in thing 10, 15 years back, and people got onto it, and now they want to learn more. So, which is a good thing. Maybe we would disagree with certain stories, and of course, there are a whole lot of books out there which totally warp what the original stories were. There is a whole lot of modern myth making happening, especially when it comes to Karna and Ravan and all those people. Uh, that's not what I'm talking about. We know that those are false narratives, modern myth making that's happening. For a genuine seeker who probably has heard of Sri Krishna but has not read the Bhagavad Gita, knows about Sri Ram but has questions in his mind. When I write about Parshurama, for me, I'm starting off from a little bit of an advantage because he's heard it's the sixth avatar, but he doesn't know much about it. Also, like I said, there is no Parshuramayana, so he doesn't have a text to compare this with, which puts a great responsibility on me that if my book does become popular, I do not put out a false message there saying, change Parshurama's story to be what I think it is. Though there is a little bit of the creator's input there, the one thing that I tell even my friends who want to write on Puranic stories is to be pleased to be true to the character that you are writing about. Do not bring your agenda, your isms to try and judge the character. Understand him and write the story, which is what I did in this book. So when you read about Parashurama in Rama of the Axe, you are going to understand what is the role of a guru, why he's so important, what is the purpose and the benefit that you can get from a sadhana, something you do every day, a ritual, why it is important to follow. Every family, every community has a sampradaya that they follow. why it is important to connect to that and take you there, and why it is important to always keep dharma as your moral compass. Parashurama can easily become another Kartavira Arjuna. What prevented him from becoming that? What is it that, two incredibly powerful people, Kartavira Arjuna and Parashurama, what is the differentiation? Only dharma will tell you who's right, who's wrong. And if I take that dharma component out of my story, I'm just left with some fantasy fiction that you find a lot of in America now, that borrows so much from what they call Oriental mysticism. They use all sort of exotic words for it. My story becomes something like that. So there is a dharma to the decisions that he's made. I have tried to bring it out in an interesting way in the story. Why is he an avatar? What is his realization? The whole story of Parshurama is a story about self-realization. And this is not a story just of Bhagavan Parshuram. It is also a story of Saptarishi Jamadagni and Renuka Devi. Why is she considered a goddess? Why is Jamadagni called the Saptarishi? There is some achievement, there is some adherence to certain principles that these people have carried throughout their lives, which makes them this. And my story is an effort to bring that out. Not just tell you a fantastical story about superpowers and, fantastic weapons, divyastras being thrown around. All this may be there, but there is a power behind that. There is a reason behind it. There is a whole lot of spirituality behind it. And what spirituality that people may be skeptical about. In my book, that precisely is the reason why certain things happen. And how self-realization of Bhagavan Parshuram happens. And how he realizes what his dharma is, why he is an avatar, and what is it that he should do. So I have not taken the spiritual or the dharmic component away from my story. I have not made it another fantasy mythology genre book. There are prayers in my book. There is the coming of a Mahavidya in my book. Why does the Mahavidya come? What is the connection with Parshurama? All this is there. If there's somebody who's chanced across this book, you may notice something different. There are songs in the book. You don't find, especially in English, you don't find books with songs in it, with rhymes in it. We are a culture that celebrates music. We have a term called Nada Brahma. No other theology has this. So when there is a divine happening, a spiritual awakening happening, I have put it out in verse form. So I hope I'm making my message clear that this is not a fantasy fiction kind of thing where, I just wrote it because there's this great avatar and I want to write about him. And that is the trend nowadays. I have tried to show you what is the spirituality behind this, what is the dharmic component behind this. And I have not taken that out. I have not tried to write a Puranic story without this. It doesn't work. At least for me. You're not going to understand why a person is an avatar or why he's such a great person, why we have temples to him if you take dharma out of the equation.
Avatars are a very simple purpose. Yada dahi dharmasya glanir. So whenever there's a glani happens, avatar appears.
Yeah.
And sometimes human beings are also empowered to protect.
Yes.
Because it's like the CEO doesn't come all the time. CEO has other people's staff which are appointed,
True.
elevated to take care of his job, right? So sometimes it doesn't come. So the for viewers, the link of the book will be in the video. Please do check it out and see and send your feedback to us and to the author directly. Also his email, and he's pretty much well known, and his Twitter handle also I'll publish here, so you can check it out or him. And also it's published by Westland. So Westland websites also, people can go and check it out and see this book is already available there. In fact, you'll know that there's a Hidden Hindu book came out some years back, and one of the first shows was done on this channel.
Wow.
And
okay.
so and he is a bestseller in India nowadays for the Hidden.
Yes.
So the
I think part 3 just came out.
the fiction sells more than non-fiction. And it's a trend actually, which is fortunate as well as unfortunate also, because sometimes allegorical stories are very powerful message conveyors. I don't deny it,
Yes.
because the Bhagavad Puran also uses Puranjay's story as allegorical story.
Yeah.
And so to make a point, like just now, just like we discussed the Panchatantra, Dhritarashtra is being taught the art of diplomacy using a similar story, example of
Yeah.
animals.
Yeah.
And so it's a way of communicating a dharmic message also. So that doesn't make fiction, but this is a commonsensical thing. Like
Yeah.
people have used it in the past and people using it now also. And so thank you very much for coming on the show, Ranjith Radhakrishnan ji, and for all the viewers for watching it. And let us know your feedback, what you think of the video, and do get the book Rama of the X, and let us know your feedback.
Thank you so much for having me on the show. I have a last message for my readers. I think only the Kindle version is available in the US right now. I think the paperback is out sometime late August. I will let you know about that. Thank you, Sattology channel, for having me here. Very glad to be here. Thank you to my readers who have made this book a success. Part 2 will be out probably early next year. I'm looking forward to your feedback on that. It was a great conversation. I mean, those probing, really intelligent questions, and I was happy to answer them. Thank you all for that.
Thank you. Namaste.
Namaste.